Sometimes a marriage doesn't end when someone leaves. Sometimes it ends the moment someone realizes they deserve better. The golden glow of Manhattan's skyline spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Montgomery penthouse, painting the city in shades of amber and gold as Ava Brooks stood alone in the dining room she had spent 12 years building memories inside. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead, scattering delicate reflections across the polished walnut table where she had carefully arranged 3 place settings. Not 2, 3. Her fingers lingered on the stem of a wine glass before she adjusted it by less than an inch. Everything was perfect. The white roses in the center arrangement were fresh from the florist Ethan always preferred. The candles were lit. The music drifting softly through hidden speakers was the same jazz playlist that had played during their first anniversary dinner. To anyone else, it looked like the celebration of a successful marriage. To Ava, it felt like a farewell. At 38, Ava carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from surviving disappointments nobody else knew about. Her deep brown skin glowed beneath the warm lighting, and the elegant black dress she wore reflected neither desperation nor sadness. It reflected dignity, the kind of dignity that remained standing long after love had begun to crumble. She glanced toward the silver frame resting beside the grand piano. A photograph captured a younger version of herself and Ethan smiling on the day Montgomery Capital officially opened its first office. Back then, they had been partners in every sense of the word. Dreamers, builders, believers. She remembered the tiny apartment they had shared. The nights spent reviewing business plans at a kitchen table too small for their ambitions. The sacrifices, the promises, the certainty that they would always choose each other. A faint smile touched her lips before fading just as quickly. Some promises, she had learned, expired long before people admitted it. Her phone remained silent on the marble countertop. No message, no call, no explanation. Ethan was already 40 minutes late. Again, outside, the city lights blinked like distant stars. Inside, the silence grew heavier with every passing minute. Ava walked toward the kitchen and opened a drawer. Hidden beneath neatly folded linens rested a cream-colored envelope. Her hand hovered over it for a moment. Inside were documents that could change everything. She had carried them with her for 3 months. 3 months of unanswered questions. 3 months of suspicious business trips. 3 months of watching the man she loved become a stranger wearing her husband's face. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be the final chance. Not for the marriage. For Ethan. The sound of an elevator arriving in the private foyer echoed through the penthouse. Ava's heartbeat remained steady. She carefully returned the envelope to its place and closed the drawer. The front door opened. She heard laughter. A woman's laughter. Soft. Confident. Familiar. Ava slowly lifted her eyes toward the entrance as footsteps approached across the marble floor. The candles continued flickering. The city continued glowing. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the final thread holding her marriage together begin to pull tight. Because in just a few seconds, Ethan Montgomery would walk through that doorway. And everything was about to change. The sound of heels against marble reached the dining room a heartbeat before they appeared. Ava remained perfectly still beside the table as Ethan stepped into the warm glow of the chandelier, his tailored navy suit immaculate, his expression calm, almost casual. For a brief moment, he looked exactly like the man she had once fallen in love with. Then the woman beside him smiled. Vanessa Hart carried herself with effortless confidence. Her designer coat draped over one arm, a diamond bracelet catching the candlelight with every movement. She looked around the penthouse as though she belonged there, as though she had every right to stand beside Ava's husband. Ethan loosened his tie and offered a small smile. "Sorry we are late," he said. "Traffic was impossible tonight." Ava noticed the way he avoided her eyes. Not dramatically, not enough for anyone else to recognize, but she saw it. 12 years taught a woman the language of silence. "I hope you do not mind," Ethan continued. "Vanessa was nearby after a client meeting. I invited her to join us." The room grew strangely quiet. Even the soft jazz drifting through the speakers seemed distant. Vanessa stepped forward first. "Thank you for having me," she said warmly. "Your home is beautiful." Ava returned the smile with perfect courtesy. "You are welcome. Nothing more. Nothing less." For a second, disappointment flickered across Vanessa's face. Perhaps she had expected anger, tears, questions. Instead, she found calm waters hiding unknown depths. Ethan removed his watch and placed it on the sideboard. Small details, familiar habits. Yet tonight everything felt different. The distance between them stretched wider than the Manhattan skyline outside the windows. Vanessa approached the dining table and stopped. Her gaze settled on the three place settings. One chair stood at the head of the table, another beside it, the third across from them. She glanced at Ethan. Ethan nodded almost imperceptibly. Then Vanessa pulled out the chair beside him. Ava watched the movement without reacting. It was a simple action. A chair. A seat. Yet symbols carried weight. That chair had belonged to Ava for 12 anniversaries. Every celebration. Every difficult conversation. Every victory. Every loss. Tonight another woman claimed it without hesitation. Ethan said nothing. Not a single word. The silence landed harder than any explanation ever could. Vanessa sat gracefully and adjusted her napkin. "This is lovely," she said. "You must host incredible dinners." Ava moved toward her own seat across the table. "I used to." Ethan finally looked up. Something about her answer unsettled him. His fingers tightened slightly around his glass before relaxing again. The candles flickered between them, tiny flames dancing against crystal and silver. Ava studied her husband carefully. This was the moment she had imagined countless times during sleepless nights. The moment when the truth would finally stand in plain sight. Yet instead of heartbreak, she felt clarity. The kind that arrived after months of doubt. The kind that transformed pain into certainty. Outside, the city sparkled beneath the night sky. Inside, three people sat down to dinner. Only one of them understood that this meal was not the beginning of a confrontation. It was the beginning of an ending. The first course arrived untouched. A perfectly prepared meal sat beneath the warm glow of candlelight while conversation drifted across the table like a performance nobody truly believed. Vanessa spoke often. Ethan listened. Ava observed. It was a pattern that had become familiar long before tonight. Vanessa described a recent charity gala attended by executives, investors, and public figures. She laughed easily, her voice carrying confidence sharpened by admiration. Every story seemed to include Ethan somehow. Every memory appeared carefully chosen. Every glance in his direction lasted a fraction longer than necessary. Ava noticed everything. Not because she was searching for evidence anymore. She had stopped searching months ago. Tonight she was simply watching a choice unfold in real time. Ethan asked Vanessa questions he no longer asked his wife. He remembered details about her schedule, her travel plans, her favorite restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. Small things, ordinary things. Yet each one felt heavier than the crystal glasses resting on the table. Because attention was a form of love. And lately, Ava had been receiving less and less of it. Outside the windows, the city shimmered beneath the darkness. Inside, the silence between husband and wife stretched wider with every passing minute. Then Vanessa smiled and lifted her wrist slightly. The diamond bracelet sparkled beneath the chandelier. "I almost did not wear this tonight," she said. "But it is one of my favorite gifts." Ethan lowered his eyes toward his plate. Just for a second. That was all. Ava recognized the bracelet immediately. Not because she had seen it before. Because she knew the jeweler. 3 months ago, Ethan had claimed he was purchasing a retirement gift for a senior executive. Ava remembered the charge. $28,000. She remembered because she had approved the accounting report herself. The realization should have hurt. Instead, it settled quietly inside her like the final piece of a puzzle sliding into place. "It is beautiful," Ava said politely. Vanessa seemed almost disappointed by the response. Perhaps she had expected confrontation, a challenge, something dramatic. Instead she found grace. Ethan finally cleared his throat. "Ava has always appreciated fine jewelry." Ava turned her eyes toward him. "I used to appreciate honesty more." The room became still. Vanessa reached for her wine glass. Ethan looked away first. A strange heaviness settled over the table. For years Ava had questioned herself. Wondered if she was imagining the distance. Wondered whether stress, business pressures, and endless responsibilities had simply changed them both. Tonight all uncertainty disappeared. She no longer needed explanations. The truth was sitting across from her wearing a smile. Her gaze drifted toward the silver anniversary photograph near the piano. The younger versions of herself and Ethan seemed like strangers now. Two people full of dreams. Two people who believed success would strengthen their bond instead of testing it. Ava remembered helping him build Montgomery Capital from a single office barely larger than a conference room. She remembered the nights reviewing contracts until 2 in the morning. The weekends sacrificed. The risks. The faith. She had stood beside him when nobody else believed in the future he promised. Ethan followed her gaze toward the photograph. For a moment something flickered across his face. Guilt. Regret. Recognition. Then Vanessa laughed softly at something on her phone, and the moment vanished. Just like that. Ava lowered her eyes to her plate and felt an unexpected calm settle over her heart. The test was continuing exactly as she expected. And with every choice Ethan made, the answer became impossible to ignore. The dessert plates remained untouched as the evening drifted deeper into the night. The candles had burned lower now, their softened light casting long reflections across crystal and silver. Ethan appeared increasingly uncomfortable, though he could not have explained why. Nothing dramatic had happened. No accusations. No arguments. No scene. Ava had offered him exactly what he had been denying her for months. Space to reveal who he truly was. And he was doing so with remarkable consistency. Vanessa continued speaking about future projects, upcoming events, and business opportunities. She seemed completely at ease inside the penthouse. Too comfortable. As though she had rehearsed this moment long before stepping through the door. Ava listened politely while tracing the rim of her water glass with one finger. Her mind had already traveled elsewhere. 3 months earlier, she had been sitting alone inside a private office overlooking Central Park when the first report arrived. She remembered the weight of the envelope in her hands, the hesitation before opening it, the final hope that everything she feared would prove untrue. Instead, page after page had confirmed what her heart already suspected. Photographs, travel records, restaurant reservations, messages. Nothing scandalous, nothing sensational. Just evidence of emotional choices made again and again. The kind of betrayal built slowly through attention, secrecy, and misplaced loyalty. What surprised her most was not Ethan. It was Vanessa. The investigation had uncovered something far more complicated than a simple affair. Vanessa had spent years carefully positioning herself near powerful executives, building influence, creating dependence, gaining trust. Ethan was not her first target. He was simply her most successful one. Ava had studied every report, every timeline, every financial connection. What she discovered was both disappointing and strangely liberating. Vanessa had never truly wanted Ethan. She wanted access, opportunity, proximity to power. Ethan simply happened to be standing in the right place. Across the table, Vanessa laughed again, touching Ethan's arm lightly as she shared another story. Ethan smiled automatically. Ava watched the interaction without jealousy. That emotion had already exhausted itself. What remained was clarity, the kind that arrived when illusions finally disappeared. Her gaze drifted toward the grandfather clock standing near the library entrance. 10:23. Almost exactly the time she had opened. That first investigative report months ago. Strange how life created circles. Ethan noticed her looking at the clock. "Do you have somewhere to be?" he asked. The question lingered in the air. Ava met his eyes calmly. "No," she replied. "I am exactly where I need to be." Something about her answer unsettled him again. Vanessa sensed it too. For the first time all evening, uncertainty flickered across her confident expression. Ava stood and crossed the room toward the bar. She poured herself a glass of sparkling water and paused beside the anniversary photograph near the piano. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the silver frame. Ethan followed her gaze. "That was a good day," he said quietly. Ava smiled. "It was. We built something incredible." The words sounded almost defensive, almost like a man trying to convince himself. Ava looked at the younger couple smiling inside the photograph. Then she looked back at her husband. "Yes," she said softly. We did. Ethan relaxed slightly, but Ava was not talking about the company, and deep down she suspected he knew it. Because while Vanessa believed tonight was a victory and Ethan believed it was merely an uncomfortable dinner, Ava understood the truth. The final chapter had already begun. Neither of them had realized it yet. The evening had reached that strange point where every word carried more meaning than the person speaking intended. The candles were nearly half their original height now, their soft flames reflected in the tall windows overlooking Manhattan. Ethan loosened his collar slightly. Vanessa remained poised, though the effortless confidence she had displayed earlier was beginning to show small fractures around the edges. Ava noticed both. She noticed everything. For months she had practiced seeing clearly. Not what she hoped was true. Not what she feared was true. Simply what was. Ethan reached for his glass. The board approved the expansion proposal this afternoon, he said, directing the comment toward Ava. It was the first time all evening he had attempted to include her in a meaningful conversation. Ava met his gaze. Congratulations. That is all. Ethan asked with a faint smile. Usually you have a dozen questions. Ava folded her hands neatly in her lap. You stopped asking for my opinions a long time ago. The smile disappeared. Vanessa looked between them carefully, sensing an undercurrent she could not fully understand. Ethan shifted in his chair. That is not fair. Ava tilted her head slightly. Is it not? Silence followed. Heavy. Precise. The kind of silence that revealed more than arguments ever could. For a moment Ethan appeared ready to say something important. Something honest. Ava could see it in his eyes. The hesitation. The conflict. The opportunity standing directly in front of him. This was the chance she had been giving him all evening. Not to explain. Not to defend himself. Simply to choose. Choose truth. Choose accountability. Choose the marriage they once built together. Instead, Vanessa laughed softly and reached for a dessert spoon. I still cannot believe how beautiful this place is, she said. The view alone must be worth millions. Ethan immediately turned toward her. The sunsets are even better during the summer. Just like that, the moment vanished. Ava lowered her eyes. Not in sadness. In certainty. The final answer had arrived. Months ago she had hired a private investigator hoping to discover the truth. Tonight she realized she had never needed reports, photographs, or financial records. A person's priorities eventually reveal themselves without assistance. All they require is time. Ava rose from her chair and crossed the room toward the kitchen. Behind her she could hear Vanessa speaking again and Ethan responding with easy familiarity. The sound no longer hurt. In the kitchen, she opened the drawer containing the cream-colored envelope. Her fingers rested lightly on its surface. 3 months of evidence waited inside. 3 months of difficult truths. 3 months of preparation. Yet the envelope no longer felt like a weapon. Felt like freedom. She closed the drawer again without removing it. Not yet. Returning to the dining room, she paused beside the piano. Her gaze landed once more on the silver anniversary photograph. 12 years preserved inside a single frame. 12 years of sacrifices, dreams, setbacks, victories, and promises. Ethan noticed her standing there. What are you thinking about? He asked. Ava smiled softly. It was the gentlest smile she had offered all evening. I was thinking about choices, she said. Ethan frowned slightly. Choices? Ava nodded. The small ones usually matter the most. For the first time that night, uncertainty crossed his face. Because somewhere deep inside, Ethan Montgomery was beginning to realize that this dinner was not unfolding the way he thought it was. And he was running out of time to understand why. The clock struck 11 as the final traces of dessert disappeared from the table. Beyond the glass walls of the penthouse, Manhattan glittered beneath a velvet sky, unaware that an entire life was quietly reaching its breaking point 20 stories above the city. Ava stood beside the dining table gathering empty plates with the same grace she had carried throughout the evening. Not once had she raised her voice. Not once had she demanded answers. That alone seemed to disturb Ethan more than any confrontation could have. Vanessa checked her phone and smiled. I should probably head home soon, she said lightly. It has been such a lovely evening. Ava glanced toward her and returned a polite smile. I am glad you enjoyed it. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Something about Ava's calmness no longer felt natural to him. It felt deliberate. As though she knew something he did not. As though she had already reached a conclusion he had not yet discovered. Ava carried the dishes into the kitchen and stood alone for a moment beneath the soft recessed lighting. The silence felt different now. Lighter. Final. She opened the familiar drawer and looked at the cream-colored envelope resting exactly where she had left it. This time she picked it up. Her fingers moved across the smooth paper surface. Months of preparation. Months of patience. Months of waiting for one last reason to believe the man she married still existed somewhere beneath the stranger he had become. Slowly, she returned to the dining room holding the envelope. Ethan noticed it immediately. "What is that?" he asked. Ava placed it gently on the center of the table. The chandelier reflected across the cream-colored paper like scattered pieces of moonlight. Vanessa's smile faded slightly. "Just something I have been meaning to share," Ava said. Ethan stared at the envelope. "What kind of documents are those?" Ava took her seat. "The kind that answer questions." Neither of them spoke. The city hummed beyond the windows. Somewhere far below, traffic moved through the streets like rivers of light. Inside the penthouse, time seemed to slow. Ethan reached toward the envelope but stopped halfway. "Questions about what?" Ava looked directly into his eyes. For the first time all evening, there was no distance in her gaze. No uncertainty. No hesitation. Only truth. About whether this marriage still mattered to you. Ethan's expression hardened. "Ava, what exactly are you talking about?" She folded her hands calmly. 3 months ago I learned things I never wanted to learn. I discovered secrets I never wanted to find. But tonight was not about evidence. Vanessa lowered her eyes. Ethan remained frozen. Ava continued softly. "Evidence can tell you what someone did, cannot tell you who they are. I already knew what was inside that envelope. What I did not know was whether you would choose us when given the chance." The words landed heavily between them. Ethan looked away first. Ava noticed. Just as she had noticed every other choice he made that night. The silence stretched. Long unavoidable. Then finally, Ava pushed the envelope toward him across the polished table. The movement was small. Gentle. Yet it carried the weight of 12 years. "Go ahead," she said quietly. "Open it." Ethan stared at the envelope as though it contained something dangerous. In a way it did. Not because of what was inside, but because of what it represented. Truth had a way of dismantling comfortable illusions. Slowly he reached forward and broke the seal. The sound seemed unusually loud in the silence. Vanessa shifted in her chair. Ava remained perfectly still. Ethan pulled out the documents and began turning pages. At first his expression revealed nothing. Then his eyes narrowed. Then came confusion, followed by disbelief. The first section contained photographs. Not romantic photographs. Not scandalous ones. Images of private meetings. Expensive dinners. Conversations with executives from rival firms. The second section contained financial records. Consulting payments. Luxury gifts. Travel reimbursements. Patterns that were impossible to ignore once viewed together. Ethan turned another page. Then another. The color slowly drained from his face. Vanessa leaned forward. "What is that supposed to prove?" she asked quickly. Ava did not look at her. Her eyes remained on Ethan. "Keep reading." Ethan continued. A detailed timeline emerged across the pages. Names. Dates. Transactions. Connections. Several powerful executives appeared repeatedly. Men who had once trusted Vanessa. Men who had promoted her. Men who had eventually been replaced after helping advance her career. Ethan reached the final report and stopped. The room became very quiet. Outside, the city lights continued sparkling against the darkness. Inside, an entirely different reality had begun to emerge. "No," Ethan said softly. "This cannot be right." Ava folded her hands. "I hired 2 separate investigative firms. They reached the same conclusions independently." Vanessa laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous. You hired people to spy on me." Ava finally turned toward her. "No. I hired them because I was trying to understand why my husband, no longer recognized the difference between loyalty and attention. Vanessa opened her mouth but found no response. Ethan continued reading. Then his eyes landed on the final section, the one Ava had intentionally placed at the bottom. His breathing slowed. "What is this?" he asked. Ava glanced toward the pages. "The company archives." Ethan frowned. "Why are these here?" "Because there is something else you forgot." Slowly, he examined the documents. Old contracts, early funding agreements, original business filings from 12 years ago, records dating back to the beginning of Montgomery Capital, back before private jets, before magazine covers, before boardrooms and billion-dollar valuations, back when success had been nothing more than an idea shared between two people sitting at a small kitchen table. Ethan turned another page and froze. Then another. His eyes widened. "Ava!" The word barely escaped his lips. She offered a calm smile. "You finally found it." The document in his hands contained signatures from the company's earliest restructuring. Hidden among dozens of legal filings was a detail he had not noticed in over a decade. Ava Brooks had not simply supported Montgomery Capital. She had rescued it. During its most fragile year, when investors withdrew and bankruptcy seemed inevitable, Ava had quietly liquidated her inheritance, leveraged her own assets, and secured the financing that kept the company alive. Without that decision, there would never have been a Montgomery Capital. There would never have been a CEO named Ethan Montgomery. There would never have been an empire at all. Ethan looked up slowly. The woman sitting across from him suddenly seemed different. Not because she had changed, because he was finally seeing her clearly. And for the first time that night, genuine fear appeared in his eyes. For several seconds nobody spoke. The silence settled across the penthouse like fresh snow, soft and impossible to ignore. Ethan remained frozen with the documents in his hands, staring at pages that suddenly felt heavier than any contract he had ever signed. Across from him, Ava sat calmly beneath the chandelier's fading glow. She looked exactly the same as she had at the beginning of the evening, yet everything had changed. Ethan lowered the papers slowly. His eyes searched her face as though he were meeting her for the first time. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked quietly. Ava gave a small, almost saddened smile. "I did tell you." Ethan frowned. "No. I would remember something like this." "You remember the result," Ava replied. "You forgot the sacrifice." The words landed gently, but their weight was undeniable. Ethan looked down again at the old financial records. He remembered that year. The sleepless nights. The investors who walked away. The fear of losing everything before it had truly begun. He remembered the miracle that saved the company. What he never remembered was asking how that miracle happened. Vanessa suddenly stood from her chair. "This is absurd," she said sharply. "None of this changes anything." Ava turned toward her calmly. "You are right." Vanessa blinked. The answer had not been what she expected. "It changes nothing," Ava continued, "because tonight was never about you." The room became still once more. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time all evening, she looked uncertain. Ethan barely seemed to notice. His attention remained fixed on Ava. 3 months, he said softly. "You knew for 3 months." Ava nodded. "Yes. And you never confronted me." "No, why?" Ava looked toward the city beyond the windows. Thousands of lights stretched across Manhattan like distant stars. "Because I did not want an explanation," she said. "I wanted a choice." Ethan's face tightened. The truth finally reached him. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Like sunlight breaking through fog. Every opportunity she had given him during dinner. Every question. Every silence. Every glance. She had not been waiting for him to defend himself. She had been waiting for him to remember who he was. And he had failed. Ethan set the documents down. "Ava." Her name sounded different now. Less certain. More fragile. "I made mistakes." Ava nodded gently. "Yes. I can fix this." The words came quickly. Almost desperately. "We can fix this." Ava studied him for a long moment. Once, hearing those words would have filled her with hope. Tonight they only filled her with peace. "That is the difference between us," she said softly. You still think this is about fixing something? Ethan stared at her. Then what is it about? Ava looked toward the anniversary photograph near the piano. The younger couple smiled back from another lifetime. A lifetime built on trust, sacrifice, and shared dreams. It is about understanding what was lost, she answered. Ethan followed her gaze. For the first time that evening, he truly saw the photograph. He truly saw the woman sitting across from him. And deep inside, a terrible realization began to grow. Some things could be repaired. Some mistakes could be forgiven. But there were moments in life when a heart quietly closed a door without anger, without revenge, and without looking back. And Ethan was beginning to fear that door had already closed. 1 year later, the Grand Regency Ballroom glowed beneath a sea of crystal chandeliers, their light cascading across polished marble and elegant gowns as the most influential leaders in American business gathered for the annual Visionary Leadership Gala. Conversations filled the air. Cameras flashed. Reporters moved through the crowd searching for the evening's most anticipated guest. When the ballroom doors opened, the room gradually fell silent. Ava Brooks stepped inside wearing a breathtaking crimson gown that seemed to capture every beam of light around her. The color was not chosen for attention. It was chosen for symbolism. Once red had represented love. Then it represented pain. Now it represented power. Her natural grace commanded attention without demanding it. Confidence followed her like a quiet melody. In the year since that dinner, Ava had transformed more than her life. She had transformed the future of the company she helped create. Under her leadership, new initiatives flourished. Employee programs expanded. Charitable foundations multiplied. The business press called her one of the most respected executives in America. But titles no longer mattered to her the way they once had. She had discovered something more valuable than success. Peace. Across the ballroom, Ethan Montgomery stood near one of the tall windows overlooking the city. He looked older than he had a year ago. Not because of age. Because regret had a way of changing a person. The months following that dinner had forced him to confront every choice he had made. Vanessa had disappeared from his life shortly afterward, taking with her the illusion he had mistaken for happiness. The company remained successful. The money remained. The reputation remained. Yet none of it filled the quiet places left behind. As Ethan watched Ava greet investors, executives, and community leaders, he saw something he had failed to see for years. She was not extraordinary because of what she accomplished. She was extraordinary because of who she had always been. Strong when nobody noticed. Loyal when nobody deserved it. Graceful when bitterness would have been easier. Ava eventually felt his gaze and turned toward him. Their eyes met across the ballroom. For a moment the noise faded. The chandeliers sparkled overhead. The city shimmered beyond the glass. A year ago, that look might have reopened old wounds. Tonight it brought only gratitude. Ethan slowly approached. He stopped a respectful distance away. "You look incredible," he said quietly. Ava smiled. "Thank you, Ethan." The warmth in her voice surprised him. There was no anger there. No resentment. Only kindness. Somehow that hurt more than hostility ever could. "I am proud of you," he said. Ava nodded. "I am proud of me too." Ethan lowered his eyes briefly before looking back up. "I spent a long time wishing I could change that night." Ava glanced toward the ballroom filled with laughter and celebration. "I know. Do you ever regret leaving?" The question lingered between them. Ava thought about the years they shared, the dreams they built, the lessons they learned. Then she smiled gently. "No," she answered. "Because leaving was the moment I finally found myself." Ethan nodded slowly. Deep down he understood. Some stories ended with reconciliation. Some ended with revenge. Theirs ended with truth. Ava offered him one final smile before turning toward the stage where she was about to receive a leadership award. The audience rose to its feet in applause as she walked forward beneath the golden lights. Ethan remained where he stood, clapping along with everyone else. And as he watched the woman he once called his wife step confidently into the future she had earned, he finally understood the lesson that would stay with him forever. Sometimes the greatest loss in life is not losing the person you love. It is realizing too late that they were the best thing that ever happened to you.